Tommy, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Ger.
What's the crack?
Yeah, all good now. Semi-final week. This is where he gets going, Ger. Probably even more intense or exciting than a final itself, I'd say, Ger, because there's one thing that's worse than losing a final, and that's losing a semi-final. So this is the one, like, you want to be there on All-Ireland final day. Final day is just one of them, it's the magical days, one of the days you dream of as a kid growing up, walking out in the parade, meeting the president, staying overnight that night in the team hotel, maybe coming back to the fans, hopefully with the cup. But to get there is the key, and that's the mission this weekend. So listen, the build-up, I suppose, brings back memories of your own semi-final weeks, and definitely a big week as regards intensity.
What would you, on semi-final week, was it different for you from final week? Was it actually a little bit less pressure in some ways because you were less worried about tickets and all that stuff, or was it kind of similar?
Yeah, no, tickets never bothered me. My mum was very good that way, and we had a good process going there between the two of us. So tickets never bothered me. And Brian Cody would have advised that. And I remember reading things from the team, the Kerry Golden years that time. That was a big video in our house growing up. So listening to them guys kind of giving advice in some of the world columns and different things. So I learned not to let any of that be any distraction to myself. So no, semi-final was just as big as the final, if not bigger, because that was the dream, was to get to the final, Ger. Was it any different, the build-up to it? Probably not, because we treat every day like an All-Ireland final or a big day. So, yeah, it would be ramped up a little bit, but you're ready for it.
Sorry, did your ma just look after the tickets? That was it? And everybody knew, no, don't talk to me, talk to the mum, and that was it? She decided who was in and who was out?
I can't throw her under the bus here now and pretend that she was disappointing people on final day. No, I had a diary, say if it was on, usually it was the first or second week of September, I'd have it there in the work diary that Sunday, and anyone that ever asked me for a ticket, I went into the diary. And then once we got the tickets, like, you could have 50, 60 names in that diary on any All-Ireland final, and I still have the diaries there to go back and look at them. And but just when we got the tickets, then you asked for how many you could get, really. And when you got them, then you just had to go through it. But I have so many uncles and aunties and cousins that, probably they got first preference anyway, and a couple of your best friends,
Right, okay, fair enough. It's tricky enough. Like, it is something that we take for granted, but I've certainly heard players, certainly teams who make it for the first time, who don't have that to fall back on, that kind of cultural awareness, this is going to be an issue, and somebody says, look, let somebody else look after this for you. That can become a bit of a distraction for players. One other thing, just before we get on to the games this weekend, everybody's talking about the brawl at the weekend. You guys would have gone down the same tunnel for years with your opponents, having knocked lumps out of each other, certainly in the first half of games. Did it ever boil over in the tunnel?
No, ours never boiled over in the tunnel, but I was involved in a good few that boiled over on the field, to be honest, Ger. So I'm not going to take the high horse in this one or anything. Like, unfortunately, things like that have happened over the years, and usually starts with one or two lads, and then you kind of come in to back up your teammate. My experience of them, Ger, really would be to be never really at any punches, really, or it's usually just pushing and shoving, to be honest, maybe grabbing lads, and maybe, you grab a lad onto the ground. But my experience of it is it never really boiled over too badly. Like, I don't ever remember getting a punch, to be honest, in anything like that. Like, so listen, I think it might be a good thing, really, Ger, at the end of the day, because it probably has been, with television cameras now, it's so readily available to young people and the wider public that, it probably is, it's seen so much on iPhones now, and this, that so many people see it. It's probably not nice. 30 years ago, the same thing was happening, but nobody was seeing it, if you know what I mean. So it probably will be a good thing, I think, down the road, in that I think the GA will tackle it now, and they'll probably, they'll probably send out letters to county boards and clubs to say, listen, this happens again, there's going to be huge consequences. And when there is consequences, generally people won't probably fall for it as much,
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Okay, so the games this weekend, right? Like, we're supposed to know what's going to happen, but do we really? Like, are Limerick untouchable at this stage, or is this where you're going to catch them?
I think Limerick are raging hot favourites, sure. And I think for Galway to play well, they're going to need man of the match performances from their goalie, Éanna Murphy. They're going to need Daithí Burke, David Burke. I know Gerard McInerney probably won't be playing. So I say Joseph Cooney will go back into the half-back line, possibly Pádraig Mannion centre back. I'd expect Joseph Cooney to pick up Gerard McInerney and leave, like, Pádraig Mannion is more a hurler, let the ball into him. He kind of covers for his full-back line and half-back line. He's more a reader of the game, I would think, than a man marker. Now, I know he did mark Owen Cody earlier on the year for Kilkenny and did a good job, but I would rather him hitting a load of ball than sacrificing his game. So I'd rather probably see him in the centre. But Conor Whelan and Conor Cooney, so they're going to need man of the match performances, Ger, out of all these big players, I think, for him to have a chance. And just like the last day against Cork, goals won that game for him. They're going to need a couple of goals on Sunday to beat this Limerick team.
The concerns people have over injuries this season just seem to be so heightened, Tommy. Like, I mean, it's going to be a big storyline going into the football semi-finals as well. Just a lack of time to get over injuries. Like, is your gut feeling that Limerick will have a full deck to choose from this weekend? Obviously, the big question is around Cian Lynch, but like it's 10 weeks between games now. If he does play this weekend, like, is that a concerning factor at all? If you're trying to pick holes in the Limerick argument.
Yeah, I think, Owen, it's a lot easier to come into a brilliant team than maybe come in and expecting to be the main player on the team. I think if Cian Lynch is to be picked this weekend, it's just to fit into that, Rolls Royce of a machine that they have at the moment. He's just one player of part of the 15. Towards if he's on any other team in the country, like we'll say a Tony Kelly or an Owen Cody or we'll say, Daithí Burke for Galway, you're expected, or Conor Whelan, we'll say the forward for Galway, you're expected that if you don't play well, the team will lose. Towards Cian Lynch won't have that worry. So John Kiley can throw him in. He can put him in centre forward there. Cotton O'Neill has been there and doing quite well, but he's a young player. And maybe he'll want to maybe show faith in Cotton O'Neill, say, listen, you have the jersey and you've done quite well, so you can hold on to it. But there's certain players that if they're fit, they play. And Cian Lynch is one of them for me. So I would be thinking even you'd be looking forward without cockiness, because John Kiley wouldn't do that. Paul Kinnerk wouldn't do that. But with an eye on, listen, if we're in the final, we will need Cian Lynch. So I would be throwing him in anyway, yeah.
Is there anything that we've seen from Galway this year that gives them confidence heading into this game, that there's enough about them from a physicality perspective, from a hurling perspective? Like, because it doesn't feel like they've peaked yet under Shefflin. It feels like this is still a building process and their own identity is still being worked out a little bit. Now, having said that, the one thing that they have done is that they've fought hard and they've won tight games, and so that's a good starting point to build your identity off. But like, who are they as a hurling team, and what do they have that they're going to fall back on when it comes to the challenge of facing Limerick this weekend?
Yeah, I think the one thing that they'll have going for them, Ger, is history. So you go back to the last couple of years. They brought them to, was it a point in the All-Ireland final? They brought them to 3 points in 2020 All-Ireland semi-final, 27 points, 24. So if there was one team over the last 5 or 6 years that has been consistently putting it up to this Limerick team, it has been Galway. And that I think going into a game, confidence, and some teams always have, they just have the number on another team, and it's hard to explain. If the two teams went out to play one other team in the morning, one team could beat them by 20 points, the other team might only beat them by 5. But when they play each other, it seems to be always close. Go back to the 1980 final, which Galway beat Limerick in, again, first time to win an All-Ireland in probably 50 or 60 years. I think it was 1923. So the one thing Galway have against Limerick, they have tradition, they have history, and I think that's what is all they have. Like, you're asking me about what Shefflin probably brought. Like, he has brought intensity, he has brought a consistent work rate and physicality to this Galway team, but he can't invent players, if you like. Got this Galway team, their main players are still the main players that were there in 2017 and 18. They're still the Daithí Burkes, the David Burke, the Rowan McInerney, even though he's injured, the Joseph Cooneys, Conor Whelan, Conor Cooney. They're still the spine of this team. So I think they can't just create a magical team overnight. It has to be coming in from an underage structure. And obviously there is young lads coming like Lennon and Tom Monaghan and Keenan Fahy. So there is young players coming, but the main players are still that older 27, 28 to 30 age group. So I think how can Galway win this weekend? I think the fact that Limerick are raging hot favourites won't help Limerick as such, even though they're a seasoned team. But it'll still can lead to a little bit of complacency. And if Galway can turn up there with one of these performances of the ages, I think that's their only chance really of winning the semi-final, to be honest.
Like, to kind of circle back to the first question there on these, like about Limerick and semi-finals, like, do we just kind of read too much into what happened in 2019? The Kilkenny situation and the sort of presumption that maybe they just got caught a little bit cold at the semi-final stage in a way that maybe they wouldn't have got caught in the final. And is that just the one thing you could potentially cling to this weekend?
I don't think they were caught that day, really, to be honest. They battled. Kilkenny went 9 or 10 points ahead early in that game, but they battled to the very end, and only for the sideline cut maybe they would have, was it a 65 or was it not a 65? It could have been a draw game. So I think a team that gets stunned is a team that maybe they just fall apart maybe in the last 15, 20 minutes because they weren't ready for it. I think they were ready for Kilkenny, and they love playing Kilkenny really because they see it as to beat them will be a major, feather in the cap there to win an All-Ireland. So if you look at that year, I think that was the third time they could possibly have beaten in championship that year. So I think it was just one of those years. But since then, they've just been an absolute machine. It's just victory after victory. Players missing, one goes out, one comes in. They drop Aaron Galland, they pick someone else. Seamus Flanagan doesn't play one day, he's played the next. Like, you look at the Munster final, for example. Clare, they marked all their top marquee players, kept them relatively quiet. Seamus Flanagan then steps up with 8 points from play. So I just think this Limerick team, their major advantage over everybody else is they rely on no one. Yes, they need, most of their players to chip in and that, like you would any team to win a match, but they don't rely on any one or two individuals. Each one of them nearly in the forward line are nearly match winners on their own. And as you said, injuries are starting to come back into it there now. And lucky enough for Limerick, it's not will they be out, it's will they be back. So these guys are nearly over their injuries. So Peter Casey is possibly going to be featured at some stage, and Cian Lynch. So that's coming into a team that is Munster champions. They're after winning 4 in a row in Munster. They're going for, I'd say this is to reach their 4th All-Ireland, is it, in 5 years. So listen, this Limerick team, they will have to be caught to be beaten in the semi-final, I think.
Or a sending off. That's the only other thing that you can see, an early red card that might swing the game. And like, there has been a little bit of that in Limerick this year, so maybe that's something that happens that like is not planned for, but it levels things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I always find as well they focus on maybe team playing the edge when they're the champions or they're the favourites. Whereas if a team is the underdog, Ger, and they play like Limerick are playing, people are saying they're up for this game, they're fired up and they won't be bullied today, all these kind of phrases. Whereas when they're champions and you're doing it, it's cynicism, it's playing on the edge, it's not focusing on the game. But this Limerick team does play like that. So listen, the way hurling is refereed now, the way the game is refereed, the way television cameras are being reviewing everything, you have podcasts, you have radio shows reviewing everything all week. There is more pressure on referees that they can't just kind of, like, if you remember, Ger, us looking at hurling games, there was no yellow cards, right? So you book the lad and you send them off. But say if you book the lad in the first few minutes and then he, there was an innocuous foul maybe later on in the game, but he could pretend, listen, he's noting them down. Yeah. But now when you're giving you a knock off, if you like, but now if you get larger.
Alongside the names in the diary on the All-Ireland final, were you also taking notes of who was calling your team cynical and that stuff as well?
You're on it, Ger, if that's what you're asking.
I don't think so. I think I was always a defender of that Kilkenny team. Come here, let's talk about Kilkenny then, right? I don't know what to expect from this game. I genuinely don't, because Clare have been one of the stories of the summer so far, and when everything goes well for them, they're absolutely majestic, and yet at the same time they're coming off the back of coming through the back door and the disappointment. And granted, I thought against Wexford it was like one of those trap games for them that they managed to navigate their way through, even though it required a little bit of good fortune. So do you feel great after something like that, or are you a little bit concerned? Are you a little bit tired? I don't know what the truth of that is. And I also don't know what the truth is about this Kilkenny team, because you know, there could be a rising generation who are ready to take the mantle and be great hurlers for Kilkenny for the next 4 or 5 seasons, or they might just not be good enough and they can get found out in the semi-final. So every single one of those outcomes is on the cards for this one. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, well, going back to your first thing, I think it is a perfect situation for Clare. They played unbelievable in the Munster final and lost. Towards going into that match against Wexford, I did fear for him, to be honest, because I said it then, and it's still in my mind. When you play really well and lose, you have everybody clapping in the back, telling you're a great lad, but you're still devastated because you lost, and you can't get outside. But everyone is congratulating, saying, "Listen, you did us proud, and you didn't let the jersey down." Towards when you lose and you play badly, well then you know it yourself. You don't need anybody to tell you, but they are probably, you know, there's people criticising the team or criticising yourself. Listen, you're probably criticising yourself anyway, and you're hearing it probably, you know, you might be hearing it directly, but you're probably hearing it indirectly. So it's easy then to be motivated for the next match, because every training you're just getting more ready and more ready. Towards this day now, they got over that match, right? So now going into this semi-final, they're going to be kind of under the radar. Nobody's talking about them as the hottest or favourite thing, and the bookies is probably even enough in it against a Brian Cody Kilkenny team. So I think it's a perfect situation for Brian Lohan. And Brian Lohan, I'd say, would love to get one over on this Kilkenny team. Like, I was looking at the championship record between Kilkenny and Clare. Like, when his team was at its peak, they beat Kilkenny in 1997. Then were beaten in 1999, beaten in 2004, beaten in 2006. So that Clare team, you know, when they were at their peak, I suppose, they would love to get a few more victories over on Kilkenny. And Brian Lohan would be a proud Clare man, not from, I suppose, the traditional top three of Tipperary, Cork and Kilkenny. So any time to get a victory over them, or any time that you have a better team maybe than them, you want to be coming away with a victory. So I see huge motivation coming from Brian Lohan on this one. I think he'll have these guys primed to beat Kilkenny. Like, you can imagine what's going on in that dressing room all week. This is Clare's chance to finally put one over on one of the big guns and get to an All-Ireland final. And I think it could be like, you know, the Trill in Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. I think myself, this will be an epic Saturday night.
All right, that's our appetite is suitably wet. Do you think Kilkenny are going to win?
I think it's going to be so tight. They really do. Like, I was looking at the players on both teams, Ger, right? You have Tony Kelly for Clare, you have TJ Reid for Kilkenny, you have Owen Cody for Kilkenny, Shane O'Donnell for Clare, you have Big Walter Welch for Kilkenny, Peter Duggan for Clare, Adrian Mullen scoring loads of points out around half-hour midfield for Kilkenny, Dave Fitzgerald is doing the very same for Clare, Paddy Deegan on the half-back line, inspirational for Kilkenny, David Mack on the other side for Clare, Hugh Lawler full-back is just being, after growing into an absolutely outstanding full-back for Kilkenny, but so is Conor Cleary for Clare. So, like, when you go through the players, kind of, you know, man versus man, like, it looks like just an absolute enthralling encounter. And manager even versus manager, Cody versus Lohan, very similar type characters with huge standards and huge respect and authority. So it's going to be so close. It's hard to call it, like, you know, but I'm going to go with, I don't know, you listened to James Scahill's podcast with Will there and Paul there a few weeks ago, but I think it was before the Leinster final, and they asked James who was going to win. He said Galway, and Will was pushing and pushing, but why do you think? Because I just really, really want him to win. So I'm going to go with Kenny for the very same reason.
That's fair enough. That is fair enough. There's a strong possibility we end up in extra time certainly in this game, and who knows where that takes us. Like, would you be terribly surprised if this ended in a penalty shootout?
Jeez, I hope it doesn't, Ger. I absolutely hate penalty shootouts. Remember during COVID, I was in a petrol station in Kilkenny and met a father of a young fella. Now, during COVID, I could understand the penalty shootouts, you know, because, I don't know, you couldn't have replays of competitions and stuff like that. You were trying to keep crowds to a minimum and that. But I think his son was after missing, but under 14, so after missing a penalty and lost the fine, like, you know. And I was just, this is heartbreaking, like, you know. And so, you know, like, these are amateurs and they have to go back to work, so they're not getting paid and rewarded for this risk of losing and getting, you know, you're the one person that missed the penalty to lose an All-Ireland semi-final or lose the final. So I'd love if they went, and that's a fact. Like, imagine if that was your own son or brother or father or wife or girlfriend. Like, it affects everybody. At least in a match, if you get maybe a point and you miss, say if you miss a ball, but you could still probably blame 3 other players. Why did he let it past them? Why did the goalie miss that puck out in the first few minutes? Who made the mistake for the goal? You can still make a load of different excuses and blame other people. But in a penalty shootout, really, it's just you and whoever else missed. And even watching the football the weekend, I was hoping 3 or 4 lads had missed it so that one lad wouldn't get the blame,
Yeah.
So I love to see these penalty shows just finish them for that reason, because it's not like, say, a professional, you might live in a place, but you might know the whole community. Towards in Ireland, you know everyone,
You're not getting out, yeah.
The flip side of that then is that Matthew Tierney will never have to buy a pint in Galway ever again.
Yeah, I know. It's tough.
Okay, so it's a Limerick Kilkenny All Ireland final is what you're calling tentatively.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You have a shout out for us this week.
Yeah, the show this week, Ger, suppose awfully in the minor All Ireland this weekend. It's in Nolan Park. Just remarkable from where they've come from. Michael Dignan has went back into Offaly as county board chairman, and it's just he's driving everything, football and hurling. A rising tide lifts all boats. There's a great saying, and bringing bus loads of children to matches. As they're on social media during the COVID, during the lockdowns, they were just driving everything. Coaches, they have gone into schools, the coaches gone into clubs. I think just huge work on in underage, and they're now in an All Ireland final this weekend. So the best of luck to them. But my shout this weekend goes back to the team, the great team, I suppose, of the 90s. The 3 Dooley brothers are my shout. Joe, Billy and Johnny. Just 3 amazing hurlers, and to have 3 of them coming out of the one family, the one club. It's just such a credit to their own family, I suppose, and their own club. But I remember watching, I'd say it was the 94 All Ireland. And I don't know, if anyone watching, there used to be a big poster, a big banner up on the hill. Yabba Dabba Dooley. It was always funny every time I see that. Even if you see real in the years for any of them now, it always brings you back to that time. And Johnny Dooley, probably changed, say that great Limerick team that time, the great Waterford team, great players. They were just so close not to win an All Ireland. If Johnny Dooley hadn't went for that 21, went for the goal, if he had to win for a pint like he was supposed to, Offaly's history might not be what it is today. They might not have won 94, they might not have won 98 either. So Johnny Dooley had a huge bearing, and he was already Brendan talking about him, and definitely around that time he would have been a lot of guys' favourite hurlers. Then I went on looking up to play Shinty Railway Cup, and I was involved with Joe Dooley, the brother. And Joe had that magical day in the All Ireland semi-final against Clare 1998. I think he scored 5 points from playing. He was probably 34, 35 at the time, but a great hurling man again, and loved me time with him. And myself and Jackie Turl and Hoggy and a few of them, we were there with Joe Dooley, and just a great hurling man as well, and brought huge, I suppose, colour and passion. He was Offaly manager later on in his years, and I'm sure Billy, you can't forget Billy, because in that All Ireland 94, 3 balls out to him, stand on the sideline, over the hurl, 3 points over the bar. And I thought, if ever was a case for a corner forward not to be running around, it was Billy Dooley, stand over on the 21. And well, listen, Billy Dooley was, again, I was up in Sherkieran one time, and a great driving force in that club. Then through a friend of mine, Hughie Hannon, and Billy, that's what you like to hear. He goes back to the club and he drives it on as well. So the 3 Dooley brothers, big shout out to them this week. And I suppose the Offaly era and the small, I suppose, hurling population here in general. You had the Burr team of the 90s that we all grew up looking at, 4 or 5 club All Irelands, the Hanafis, Brian Whelan, just amazing hurlers. And John tried, then I met him at the South Liberties Golf Classic there last weekend in Ballyneety, and I was lucky enough to meet, just shook hands with him, like John Try, and I didn't realise, I don't think we had met before, which is amazing. And my memory of John Try would have been against Antrim. It's probably the semi-final of, it's probably 94, 95, I'd imagine, where the ball went and he flicked it back. That Gerard Hegarty we see him do now, but this was even more exaggerated flick back into his hand, and absolutely buried it. And John Try, I think John Try, did I hear, won 3? He either won 3 or played in 3 out of 4 minor All-Irelands that time, which is...
He played goals as well, like the brother, as I think as a 15-year-old in the All-Ireland final, if memory serves.
As a 15-year-old, like they're amazing stories, and so a big shout out to Dooley's and all the lads.
One last thing about the Dooley's, all different styles, like completely not. If you look like the Mars and Tipperary, very similar style. I would say the Walshes in Kilkenny, fairly similar style. But the Dooleys are they're like 3 completely different hurlers. One, the ultimate stylish. One, the corner forward, who is like letting everybody let the ball do the work for him, and then the other one is just an absolute marauding battler with an ability, octopus arms, to score points off either side, and try and run the game from 11. It's a completely different individuals and characteristics.
Yeah, and isn't that great? Because when you're looking at teams, say for a young player going up, do I need to be as big as Groan Hegarty? Do I need to be as stylish as TJ Reid? Do I need to be as clinical as Aaron Gillan? No, you can just be yourself. These are 3 guys from the one family, the one genetics, and they're 3 different hurlers, but they still made it. And we're still heroes and scored vital scores, and we're part of a great team for many years. So you're 100% right there, Jerry. Yeah.
Good stuff. Tommy, enjoy the games this weekend. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Yeah. No, thank you. Bye.
Tommy Walsh giving us his thoughts ahead of the All-Ireland hurling semi-finals this weekend, which have definitely been overshadowed up to this point in the week.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the calendar as well, is that you're not going to have these long run-ins into these games. I think it probably will also kind of dampen the fallout from the football a little bit as well. Tomorrow probably goes full preview mode, doesn't it, for a semi-finals weekend? Maybe, yeah. Okay, we're moving on. We're sticking with the GAA, because we're joined now by former Cork minor hurler Owen Callaghan as he previews the Electric Ireland GAA Minor Hurling Championship final between Tip and Offaly. It's in a couple of minutes' time, actually. Tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you what's... I'm going to read these comments for you. Tommy's a legend and so approachable, I'd imagine, says Frank. Come on, Limerick. Tommy Walsh has no equals, says N. Cren.